The castle breathed differently at dawn. Not quieter, just held, like something in the stone walls understood that the king was moving through them and chose to be still. Every maid in the corridor knew the protocol. Hands folded, eyes down, spine straight. You became part of the architecture until the procession passed and the castle exhaled, and you were allowed to be a person again. Every maid, except one. Sarah had been working the same section of marble for 6 minutes because the stain had decided it belonged there permanently. She was not going to let it win. She finished the stroke. Then she registered the silence. Not the usual held silence, the wrong kind, the kind with weight behind it. She looked up. Boots. Expensive. Still. Planted directly in her soapy water with the casual confidence of someone who had never once considered that standing in another person's work might be an inconvenience. She followed them up. Long, dark, the kind of build that said, "Violence is an option I have simply chosen not to exercise yet." And a face, God, the face, that knew exactly what it looked like and had clearly been trading on it since adolescence. He was smiling at her. Not the polite smile of a king acknowledging staff. The other kind. The kind that assumed the smile itself was enough. That it landed like a gift and was received as one. He had been in court for 11 days straight. 11 days of people arranging their faces before he arrived in rooms, of opinions that shifted to match his before he finished the sentence, of a silence that followed him everywhere and called itself respect. He looked at this woman on her knees in front of a stain she was clearly furious about, and she had not looked up once. She did not know he was there, or she knew and had decided he was not her problem. He couldn't tell which. That was the first interesting thing that had happened in 11 days. He said something, low, smooth, calibrated to charm. The exact words didn't matter. She'd heard the register before and knew where it ended. Sarah wrung out her brush, looked him dead in the eye, and said, with the unbothered clarity of a woman reading a weather report, "Touch me and I scream." The corridor went so quiet you could hear the water dripping from her brush onto the marble. Varen's smile did not fall. It held, patient, almost curious, and that was somehow worse than anger would have been. The procession eventually moved on. Sarah went back to the stain. She won. He did not chase her. Kings did not chase. He sent the guild, the final word in any household matter. A formal, sealed instrument that had never once been declined in 20 years of Varen's reign. The summons went to the laundry at mid-morning. By mid-morning, the reply had returned. Garrett stood in front of the king holding a small folded note between two fingers like it was something he had found rather than something he was presenting. He placed it on the desk. Varen opened it. "I am in the middle of the east wing and my hands are wet." He read it once, twice, 3 times. Then he looked up at Garrett, who was studying a point on the wall approximately 4 inches above the king's head with profound professional focus. "Send it again," Varen said. "Formally." The second summons went out on official guild parchment sealed with the royal crest, delivered by 2 stewards and a guard, the kind of summons that made grown men rearrange their entire afternoon. The reply came back in 11 minutes. Still wet. By evening, something had changed in the servants' quarters. Nothing visible, nothing anyone could point to, just a particular quality to the silence when staff passed each other in corridors. A careful, controlled, almost painful quality of people in possession of something hilarious that they were absolutely forbidden from expressing. Varen sent Garrett personally. Verbal command, no note, no parchment, just Garrett's voice and 20 years of authority behind it. Sarah told Garrett, pleasantly, that she would be there without fail as soon as she finished the current section. Then she took the long route, the very long route, through the west corridor, the upper gallery, back down the servants' stair, through the storage passage, past the linen room, around the decorative fountain that nobody used, and up to the door of the king's private chamber, where she stood for a moment, looked at it, and remembered she had left something in the laundry. She went back to the laundry. Inside his chamber, Varen stood facing the wall. He stood there for a long time. And somewhere in the castle, in a corridor Garrett would never officially confirm, a senior guard pressed his fist against his mouth and made no sound at all. The next morning, Sarah arrived at the east wing before dawn and stood at the top of the servants' stair for longer than she needed to, not thinking about anything specific, just standing. The corridor below was empty. The marble was waiting. She was fine. She was completely fine, and she was going to go down those stairs and do her work, and it was going to mean nothing, the same way it had meant nothing yesterday and the day before. She went down the stairs, found a sealed envelope tucked beneath her bucket, opened it, went very still in the early gray light. Her jaw tightened, and then, just for a moment, something underneath the jaw, something she pressed flat with both hands before it could become anything. She folded the note, slipped it into her apron, got back to work. She was fine. Rael arrived the way he always did, quietly, ahead of his own announcement, with the particular stillness of a man who preferred to see a room before the room saw him. He had heard nothing about the maid. He didn't need to. Within his first hour, passing through the lower corridor toward the guest wing, he stopped, because there, in front of a closed laundry door, arms crossed, jaw working with the expression of a man attempting to solve a problem that shouldn't exist, stood King Varen, ruler of the most powerful Lycan territory in the known world, undefeated in 32 documented conflicts, commander of 6 allied packs, standing outside a door. Rael watched for a moment. Then he stopped a passing maid, young, eyes instantly down, and asked quietly what was happening. She told him, voice extremely controlled, eyes never once lifting. Rael nodded, walked away at a measured, dignified pace, turned the corner into an empty corridor, and laughed until his shoulders shook and his eyes watered and he had to brace one hand against the stone wall to remain upright. 4 minutes, maybe 5. He lost count. That night, the summit dinner table held enough wine to loosen the spine of a lesser gathering, senior council on both sides, 3 visiting alphas, and the careful, watchful energy of men who measured every word they spent. Rael waited until the second round. Then he set down his cup, folded his hands, and smiled the smile of someone who had been patient long enough. "I want to make a wager," he said. The table stilled. He laid it out cleanly. His northern empire, roads, ports, full tax rights, every trade route his family had built across 4 generations, against Varen's throne. 30 days. One condition. Not a command, not a summons, not a sealed note on royal parchment. Chosen. Willing, genuine, and real. The word landed in the room like a stone in still water. Every eye moved to Varen. Varen sat very straight. The candlelight caught the angle of his jaw, the stillness of his expression, the precise, controlled face of a man who had not lost in so long he had forgotten what the edge of it felt like. He should have paused. He should have thought about the sealed note that had gone unanswered, about the corridor, the door, the brush dripping onto marble. He didn't pause. "Done," he said. Witnesses on both sides, council members exchanging glances sharp enough to cut. Rael's expression, not triumphant, something quieter and more complicated than that, something that looked almost like concern. The terms were recorded before the cups were refilled. 30 days. In the laundry 3 floors below, Sarah was folding the last of the evening linen by candlelight, alone, unhurried. She did not know that upstairs her name had just been placed on a table between two kings. She blew out the candle. She went to sleep. And the 30 days had already begun. Day 1. The flowers arrived at the laundry before Sarah did, an arrangement so extravagant it barely fit through the door. Rare southern blooms, the kind that cost more than her monthly wage, packed so densely they smelled like a fever dream. Sarah looked at them for a long moment. Then she had them carried to the infirmary ward and left a note with the guild steward, neat and unhurried. On behalf of the sick staff, His Majesty's generosity is deeply appreciated. Day 4. Her duties were reassigned. Upper chambers, lighter work, hours that would place her, inevitably, in corridors the king actually used. By afternoon, a formal written request had landed on the household steward's desk. Reassignment back to the East Wing, please. Reason given, in Sarah's clean, unhurried handwriting, I prefer the East Wing. The marble there has more character. The steward read it 3 times. Then he processed it, because it was a legitimate request and he had no grounds to refuse it. Day 7. The formal invitation to the solstice high table went out on embossed parchment, the kind noblemen framed. She declined. Prior commitment. 3 witnesses confirmed she had promised the youngest kitchen maid, 11 years old, earnest, catastrophically bad at linen corners, a folding lesson that evening. She spent the solstice dinner on the kitchen floor teaching a child to fold hospital corners, while the most powerful men in the territory ate above her head. On day 8, Rael passed the East Wing at 6:15 and saw Sarah on her hands and knees working a section of marble with the focused, unhurried attention of someone who had decided the floor deserved her best effort, regardless of who was watching. He stopped, watched for a moment. She did not look up. He added a note to the leather notebook. She is not performing indifference. That's the thing he hasn't understood yet. There is nothing to decode. She is simply exactly what she appears to be. He underlined it, then added below, he has never encountered that before in his life. He doesn't have the vocabulary for it. This is going to take longer than 30 days to fix. He closed the notebook, walked on. Day 9. Veyron started showing up. Not obviously, a king did not lurk, but present, near, in corridors she worked. Except she was never there when he arrived. Always just left. Always arriving somewhere else just after he'd gone. He couldn't tell if it was deliberate. That was somehow the worst part. He pulled Garrett aside on the evening of day 9 with the controlled expression of a man asking a question he did not want to need answered. Is her schedule standard? Garrett didn't blink. Entirely, Your Majesty. Then why? You keep arriving slightly wrong, sire. 3 floors up, Rael added a 7th entry to a leather notebook and sealed a letter to his queen describing the situation in full. Her reply arrived 4 days later, a single line in her sharp, clean script. I want to meet her. Arrange it. Rael smiled, and on day 12, Veyron made a decision that changed everything. Not a summons, not a note, not flowers. He decided to go himself. No crown, no guard, no guild. Just him and a corridor, and 18 days left on a clock that had suddenly become the loudest thing in the castle. Bess was not a cruel person. That was the thing Sarah would keep coming back to later, that it wasn't malice. Bess was 17, warm-hearted, and constitutionally incapable of holding anything inside for longer than 4 days. She said it the way you say something everyone already knows, tossing it over her shoulder while reaching for a linen stack, voice light and casual, and completely unaware of what she was detonating. At least the 30 days are halfway gone, right? Must be strange, all of it. But at least there's an end. Sarah stopped. She looked at Bess, and Bess looked back. And the moment she saw Sarah's face, the color drained from hers. You didn't know, Bess whispered. Sarah said nothing. She looked down at the linen in her hands and folded it, slowly, corners meeting corners with precise, unhurried care. The way you move when moving carefully is the only thing standing between you and something irreversible. She set it down. She untied her apron. She walked out. Rael heard about it from Mira, who had it from a kitchen steward who had the specific haunted look of a man who had witnessed something he could not unknow. Rael sat with it for a while. Then he opened the notebook to a fresh page and wrote nothing for a long time. Finally, I built the bet to force his hand. I calculated 30 days as enough time for a man like Varen to become someone worth choosing. I did not calculate for the possibility that she would find out. I did not calculate for what her face would do with that information. He set the pen down. I owe her an apology I have no right to give yet. He closed it. For the first time since the summit dinner, Rael did not feel clever. He felt like a man who moved a piece on a board without asking whether the piece had somewhere it needed to be. She did not knock. The study door opened and she was already inside. And Varen, behind his desk, mid-correspondence, surrounded by the ordinary weight of running a kingdom, looked up, and whatever he saw in her face made him set the pen down. She stood in front of his desk, and she did not perform anything. No tears, no raised voice. Just her eyes on his, clear and direct, and absolutely devastating in their steadiness. I was never playing a game, she said. First thing, plainly. He said nothing. I am not a wager. Second, just as plain, just as quiet. The silence in the room had texture. It pressed against the walls. I don't know yet what I'm going to do, she continued, and her voice didn't waver once. But whatever I do, it will be my choice, made for my reasons. And if you ever confuse that with something you won, I will make absolutely certain you understand the difference. She turned, she walked out. The door didn't slam. That was almost worse. It closed quietly with a soft final click that echoed in the room long after she was gone. Varen sat perfectly still. He was a man who had words for everything. Treaties, commands, verdicts, elegies. 20 years of ruling had given him language for every human condition he'd ever needed to navigate. He sat there, reaching for something, anything, and found nothing. Just a vast, uncomfortable blankness where a response should have been. And underneath it, something he hadn't felt since he was 19 years old and newly king and terrified. Shame. Raw and structureless and with nowhere to go. Then Garrett appeared in the doorway with a message from Rael. 4 words. 16 days left, brother. He stopped. No flowers, no summons, no carefully engineered coincidences in corridors she happened to work. The machinery of his pursuit went quiet. On day 17, he sent a private message requesting to dissolve the bet. Formal, carefully worded, the closest thing to humble he knew how to write. Rael's reply came back in an hour. The terms were witnessed. Withdraw and the kingdom transfers at dawn. Varen read it standing up, stayed standing for a long time afterward, looking out the window at the territory that had been his since he was 19 years old. 7 days left. He went on day 23. No crown. He almost reached for it from habit and stopped himself. No guards. No note preceding him. Just him, in plain clothes, walking through the lower corridors at an hour when the castle was quiet enough that his footsteps sounded like an admission. He sat down on the floor outside the laundry door. The stone was cold. He noticed that with the specific clarity of a man experiencing discomfort he has no one to blame for. He sat there for a long time. Then he talked. Not loudly, just enough to carry through old wood and stone into whatever silence was on the other side. He told her about being 19, about inheriting a war mid-battle and spending 4 months ending it through sheer terrified refusal to let anyone see how terrified he was. About how, somewhere in those 4 months, he'd made an agreement with himself that certainty was armor, and armor was survival, and he would never again be caught without it. He told her about the bet. Not as an excuse, as a confession. The exact shape of the man he was when he made it held up in the light without flinching. "You were right about me," he said, quietly, to a door, "from the beginning. The way you looked at me that morning and saw exactly what I was. You were right, and I need you to know that I know that." He pressed the back of his head against the wood. "I'm not asking you to come out. I'm not asking for anything." A pause. "I just needed you to hear it from me. Not a note, not Garrett. Me." He sat a moment longer. Then he stood, straightened his coat from pure reflex, and walked back down the corridor. He didn't look back. On the other side of the door, Sarah sat on an overturned linen basket with a folded sheet in her lap that she'd been holding for 40 minutes without finishing. She stared at the door. The castle was quiet. His footsteps had long faded. She thought about the man who had stood in her soapy water, expecting the world to rearrange itself around his smile. She thought about the man who had just sat on a stone floor in the cold and told the truth to a piece of wood with nothing to gain from it. They were the same man. That was the problem. She pressed both hands flat against her knees. Then she reached out and put her hand flat against the door. Day 30. The throne room held the weight of it. Council in formal dress, senior alphas from both territories, scribes with ink already drawn. The kind of assembly that meant something was ending. Rael stood at the center, composed, his northern delegation flanking him in silence. Mira stood slightly apart, still, watchful, with the particular quality of a woman who understood every room she entered better than the men who built it. Varen stood at the throne. Stood, not sat, as if sitting would confirm what everyone in the room already understood. Rael opened the formal record. The terms were witnessed. 30 days, willing and genuine. The period has elapsed. The kingdom transfers. The doors opened. Sarah walked in. Nobody had summoned her. She walked to the center of the chamber and stood the way she always stood, like the floor belonged equally to everyone on it. "I understand a wager was made," she said. "I understand my name was placed on a table between two kings without my knowledge, my consent, or my presence." She let that sit for exactly long enough. "I am here because I refuse to let it resolve without my voice in the room. I am not a prize. I am not a wager. I am not currency in anyone's transaction." Then she turned and looked at Varen. "I don't know what you are yet, but the man who sat on a cold floor outside my door and told the truth, that man I am willing to find out." Rael closed the record. "The bet is void," he said. Simply, finally. The council erupted. Through all of it, Mira moved, unhurried, deliberate, until she was standing beside Sarah. Quietly, so only Sarah could hear, "I told my husband I wanted to meet you. He said you unmanned a king." Sarah held her gaze. "And?" Mira's mouth curved, just slightly. "I'm staying a month." That evening, Varen found a single folded note on the throne. No guild seal, no formal parchment, just her handwriting. 4 words. "Don't make me regret it." He stood in the empty throne room holding it until the candles burned low. 3 weeks later. No ceremony, no announcement. Just a castle that had quietly rearranged itself around something new. Varen listened more. He had not stopped being formidable. He had started being worth it. At dusk, walking the East Wing corridor, Sarah heard footsteps fall into pace beside her. She didn't startle. She knew his footsteps by now. They walked in silence through the amber light. Then, in the same unhurried voice she used for everything, she said his name. Not "Your Majesty." His name, like he was a person she had decided to know. He kept walking beside her, said nothing clever, just stayed. And for the first time in 20 years, being chosen felt like something real. Then, fast footsteps. Garrett's footsteps. the urgent kind. He came around the corner breathing hard, dispatch in hand. Varen took the letter, broke the seal, read it. His jaw tightened. It was from Caspian, exiled. A wound the kingdom thought healed. The last line read, "I know about the maid. I know what she means to you now. That makes her useful to me. Consider this a courtesy warning. The next letter goes to her." Varen folded the letter, looked east down the corridor where Sarah had gone, walking, unaware, completely unprotected. "Say nothing to anyone," he said quietly. "Not yet." He turned. There was work to do.